My name is Renee Russell. I'm 35. At 9:47 on a Tuesday night in October, I was standing in the middle of my home office, client files spread across my desk, a half-eaten bowl of soup gone cold beside my laptop, when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Mom. I almost didn't answer. I should not have answered. But I did, because even after everything, some part of me still believed that when your mother calls at 9:47 at night, it must be an emergency worth picking up for. It was an emergency, just not the kind I was prepared for. Renee? My mother's voice came through tight and clipped, the way it always does when she wants something and has already decided she deserves it. Your sister has been arrested in Santorini. We need $40,000 by Thursday morning. Wire transfer. We've already looked into it. I said nothing for 3 full seconds. $40,000, I repeated. This is not a request, she said. This is a family crisis. Your sister needs you. And there it was, the sentence she'd been polishing her whole life, pulling out whenever Gabrielle needed a lifeline, and I happened to be standing nearby. Your sister needs you. Not we love you. Not we're sorry for everything. Just your sister needs you. And the implication that my needs, my savings, my entire independently constructed life existed on standby, waiting to be liquidated whenever Gabrielle blew something up. What happened? I asked. My voice was steady. I'd had 35 years of practice being steady. It doesn't matter what happened, my father cut in. He'd been on the line the whole time, silent until now. That was his method. Let my mother deliver the demand, then add his weight when I hesitated. What matters is that your sister is sitting in a Greek jail cell right now, and we need family to show up. I wasn't invited to the wedding, I said. A pause. Renee, this is not the time. I'm just noting the timeline, Dad. I wasn't invited to Santorini 3 weeks ago. I'm being called now, on a Tuesday night, for $40,000. You're being selfish. My mother's voice shifted into the register I knew best. The wounded, incredulous tone she used when I failed to perform the role she'd written for me. Your sister is in trouble and you're keeping score. I'm not keeping score, I'm asking a question. Then the answer is we're your family and family shows up. Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, about finally saying no when every person who was supposed to love you trained you to say yes, please hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time it is there. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Because on that Tuesday night in October, I did not yet know what was inside the cardboard box sitting on my doorstep. I hadn't opened it yet. It had arrived that afternoon with a handwritten label in a script I recognized immediately and couldn't bring myself to read. So I'd set it in the hallway and gone back to my client files and told myself I'd deal with it after dinner. I hadn't dealt with it. The box was from my grandmother's attorney, and it was about to change everything. Kim, let me take you back 32 years to a kitchen that smelled like butter and cinnamon and the specific kind of safety that only exists in 1 or 2 places in your entire childhood, if you're lucky. I was 3 years old the first time I stayed with Grandma Eleanor. Her house sat at the end of a gravel road in the Berkshires, white clapboard siding, green shutters, a porch that wrapped around 2 sides, and in the kitchen a wooden table worn smooth in 2 spots where Eleanor Russell had sat every morning for 40 years. She smelled like lavender soap, and something warm underneath that I later understood was just her, the specific warmth of her, irreplaceable and permanent in the way only grandmothers can be. She made me toast with too much butter and sat across from me while I ate it, watching me with the kind of attention that made you feel like the most interesting person in the world. You have your great-aunt Clara's eyes, she told me, tilting her head. Sharp and kind at the same time, not easy to pull off. I didn't know what that meant. I was 3. I just chewed my toast. But I went back every summer, every school break I could manage. While Gabrielle, 2 years older, already the shining fixed star of the Russell family solar system, went to camps and sleepovers and eventually the kind of social events that required new clothes bought especially for the occasion, I went to Grandma Eleanor's. My parents always said it with a slight edge, like leaving me there was a convenience rather than a choice. Renee's at her grandmother's again, like it was a habit I'd developed on my own. I didn't mind. Eleanor's kitchen table was where I learned to think. She'd spread newspapers across the surface and we'd read them together. She'd ask me questions. What do you think that means? What would you do? Why? When I was 11, she handed me a ledger, an actual cloth-bound ledger she'd kept for decades, and walked me through 30 years of her personal finances. Income, expenses, savings rates, compound interest calculated by hand. Money is just information, she told me. People who treat it like a secret are usually hiding something. She squeezed my hand when she said it. You're going to build something, Renee, something real. And when you do, don't let anybody take credit for it but you. I remembered that every single time my family found a new way to suggest I hadn't. So, the first time my parents stole from me, I was 12 years old and didn't understand the word stolen yet. It happened at Easter dinner, the year I'd won a district-wide essay competition at school. The prize was a $500 savings bond, made out in my name, which my teacher had handed me in front of the whole class with a certificate that said, Excellence in Critical Thinking. I was so proud of that certificate I taped it inside my closet door so I could see it every morning. 2 weeks later, my father asked for the savings bond. Not to hold for me, not to put in an account. He said Gabrielle's dance recital costume needed alterations, and the studio had raised their fees and things were tight that month. It's just $500, he said. Casual, like it was already decided. That's my prize, I said. He looked at me with an expression I would learn to recognize over the years, mild surprise that I'd said anything at all. We'll pay it back. They never did. My mother was washing dishes at the sink. She didn't turn around. That night, I lay in bed and thought about what Grandma Eleanor had said. People who treat money like a secret are usually hiding something. I was 12. I didn't know what they were hiding yet. But something in my stomach had shifted permanently. A tectonic thing, the ground moving just slightly beneath a house that looked fine from the outside. At the dinner table the next night, Gabrielle demonstrated 3 moves from her recital routine, and my parents applauded. No one mentioned the savings bond again. I learned right then the family rule I was expected to live by. Gabrielle's needs were events. Mine were inconveniences. By the time I was 20, I'd paid my own way through community college working 2 jobs. A reception desk at a dental office from 7 a.m. to noon, then a bookkeeping shift at a dry cleaning chain from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. My apartment was a studio in a building on Fletcher Street, where the radiator clanked every night at 3 a.m., and the ceiling in the bathroom had a water stain shaped like nothing in particular. I had $1,847 in my bank account. A used accounting textbook I'd bought for $14 at a library sale, and a plan. My parents had sent Gabrielle to Harwick University on a full family fund, tuition, housing, a monthly allowance that my mother referenced frequently in conversation as proof of their sacrifice. I had received a used car at 17, which broke down 8 months later and was never replaced, and a card on my birthday every year signed by both of them. I didn't wait for them to notice. I transferred to a state university at 22, graduated at 24 with a business degree and $11,000 in student loans that I paid off in 3 years by consulting on the side while working my first real job. By 28, I had my own LLC. By 32, I had 6 retainer clients, an office sublet on Caldwell Avenue, and a down payment saved for a commercial space on the east side of town. My parents' response to this, when I mentioned it at the one family dinner I attended that year, my mother asked if Gabrielle could be added to my business as an advisor since she had, and I quote, such a good head for people. Gabrielle, at that point, had cycled through 4 jobs in 2 years and was being financially supported by my parents, who I would later learn were, by then, deeply into Grandma Eleanor's trust fund. But I didn't know that yet. Grandma Eleanor had been diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia at 81. Mild, the doctor said. She was still sharp, still funny, still made butter toast and read the newspaper every morning. But my parents, who had barely visited her in the previous decade, suddenly became very attentive. I noticed it first at Thanksgiving when I was 29. My mother had reorganized Eleanor's kitchen, not cleaned it, reorganized it, moved things, replaced the old coffee canister she'd had for 40 years with a new one from a home goods store. Small things, territorial things. She doesn't need all this clutter, my mother said briskly when I picked up the old canister, which had a crack in the lid and a faded rooster painted on the side, and which Eleanor had bought in 1974 on a trip to New Hampshire. Eleanor, sitting at the table, looked at the spot where the canister usually sat. She didn't say anything. That silence hit me harder than I could explain. Over the next 3 years, I visited Eleanor as often as I could. Every 5 or 6 weeks, sometimes more. We sat at her kitchen table, and I brought her pastries from a French bakery near my office. She was slower than she used to be. She lost words occasionally, reached for them in the air and found them late. But her eyes were still sharp and kind at the same time. And sometimes, when my parents weren't around, she'd look at me very directly and say things that didn't sound like dementia at all. "Keep your documents," she told me once, at 83, pressing my hand across the table. "What documents?" I asked. She looked at me steadily. "Every document that matters to you. Keep them somewhere safe, somewhere no one else has access to." I thought she was talking about general life advice. I was wrong. Then, the incident at my office happened 14 months before that October phone call. I had been in the middle of a working lunch, a client meeting with Sandra Okafor, the owner of a mid-sized logistics company on Branford Road, who was trying to restructure her operational costs before the end of Q4. We'd been at it for 40 minutes, making real progress, her binder spread across the conference table alongside my analysis spreadsheets. My office manager knocked. "Renee, your parents are here." I felt the specific cold that sentence produced. "Tell them I'm with a client." "They say it's urgent." Sandra looked at me. I looked at Sandra. I excused myself. My parents were standing in the reception area. My father had his coat on wrong. He'd missed a button and it sat crooked on his shoulders. My mother's expression was one I knew. Public performance mode. Chin lifted. Eyes wide enough to suggest she was the one being wronged by existing in this situation. "We need to talk," my mother said, loudly. My office manager was pretending to type. "I'm in a meeting. It's about your grandmother." And there was the hook. The one they'd learned worked on me. Your grandmother. I walked them to the small conference room at the back, not the main one where Sandra was waiting, and closed the door. "What happened?" "Nothing happened," my father said. "We're filing a petition for guardianship." Everything in me went still. "She's not capable of managing her own affairs," my mother added quickly. "The doctors agree she needs more oversight. We're just making sure her assets are protected." "From who?" I asked. My mother's eyes narrowed fractionally. "From people who might take advantage of her condition." "She doesn't have a condition. She has mild vascular dementia. She still knows where she is. She gave her cleaning woman $100 last month as a tip," my father said. $100 for 1 hour of work. I stared at him. "Eleanor can give her money to whoever she likes. It's her money." "Which is exactly the problem," my mother said. "Renee, we're not the enemy here. We're trying to protect the family's legacy." That was her signature phrase. I would hear it again. The family's legacy. Deployed with the precision of a tool, every single time the family's financial interests happened to benefit my parents at someone else's expense. "I'll be contesting that petition," I said. My mother's face changed. Something went flat behind her eyes. "That would be very disappointing." "I imagine it would be." "Your sister," my father said, taking a different tack, the way they always did when one approach didn't land, like two people running a rehearsed relay, handing the baton. Is very upset about all of this. This is hard on everyone, Renee. We need the family to be unified. I thought about Eleanor's kitchen table. I thought about the ledger. I thought about money as just information. I have a client waiting, I said. I have to get back. My father's jaw tightened. You've always made everything harder than it needs to be. Your whole life. Everything is an argument with you. That was his catchphrase. Not angry, just weary, just sorrowful, in that performative way that made whatever I did next seem like the real problem. You've always made everything harder than it needs to be. I walked back to the conference room and apologized to Sandra Okafor, and we spent the next 90 minutes getting her Q4 numbers in order. She didn't ask what had happened, but when she left, she put her hand briefly on my arm. You okay? She said. Working on it, I said. The court petition for guardianship was filed 6 weeks later. My grandmother called me the night she found out. She was upset in the particular way she got upset. Quiet, precise, none of the scattered confusion my parents claimed she suffered from constantly. They want the house, she said. That's what this is. The house and whatever's left. What's left of what? I asked. A pause. We should talk in person, she said. Come this weekend. And Renee, don't tell your parents. And I drove up that Saturday. 3 hours north, up Route 7 into the Berkshires, the hills going orange and red on either side of the road. Eleanor met me at the door with coffee already poured and a folder on the kitchen table. She was 84 years old, and she sat down across from me with the posture of a woman who had been preparing for this conversation for longer than I'd realized. I have a trust, she said. I set it up 18 years ago. Your grandfather and I before he passed. The original amount was $420,000. I said nothing. I want you to look at this. She pushed a bank statement across the table. It was dated from 3 years prior. I looked at the balance. $93,000. Eleanor. I know. She folded her hands. I've been watching it happen for 6 years. Loans that were supposed to be investments. Money for projects that never materialized. Your parents have been borrowing from the trust since your father's business failed in 2016. They never paid anything back. My face felt very warm. I put the statement down carefully. $327,000, I said. At least, she said. I haven't been given complete access to the statements. They started managing the account in 2019. Bile rose in my throat. I sat there looking at the number. $327,000 taken from an 84-year-old woman by her own children over 6 years while she watched it happen and tried to figure out what to do about it. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She looked at me with those sharp, kind eyes. Because I needed to know you were safe first, that you had something of your own that they couldn't get to. I've been watching you build your business. I've been talking to my attorney. She paused. I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. I just need a little more time. What does that mean? She put her hand on mine. It means trust me, little star. She hadn't called me that since I was small. I drove home that night with the windows down despite the cold, the hills dark on either side, my hands steady on the wheel and my mind running through everything she'd said in careful, quiet loops. Eleanor Russell died 4 months later, on a Sunday morning in February, at 7:22 a.m. Heart failure. Peaceful, her hospice nurse told me. She'd passed in her sleep. I found out from a text message. My mother sent it to the family group chat at 8:15 a.m. Mom is gone. Arrangements. TBD. 6 words. No phone call. I sat on my apartment floor and read those 6 words for a long time. My soup went cold on the counter. My phone buzzed with replies from relatives. Cousins and aunts and family acquaintances I recognized as people who'd been fed a particular story about me over the years, who would nod sympathetically at my parents over Eleanor's casket and never think to ask what I thought. I did not cry right away. Grief in my body arrived slowly, like ice melting. A deep cold spreading outward from the center, reaching my fingers and my toes and settling somewhere behind my sternum. I sat on the floor for 22 minutes. Then I got up, washed my face, and drove to the Berkshires. I was not invited to help with the arrangements. This was made clear by my mother's tight, composed expression when I arrived. The expression that said my presence was technically tolerated, but structurally inconvenient. The funeral was 3 days later. I sat in the third row. Gabrielle sat in the front with my parents, wearing a coat that cost more than my monthly office rent, her fiancé Marcus's hand on her back. No one asked me to speak. I watched the mahogany casket and thought about the ledger, about butter toast, about you're going to build something real, and when you do, don't let anybody take credit for it but you. I thought, she knew. 3 weeks after the funeral, my parents filed their guardianship petition formally, retroactively attempting to have themselves declared Eleanor's legal decision-making proxies in the months before her death, a maneuver that their attorney apparently believed could extend their authority over her remaining estate. I called an estate attorney named Patricia Wolfe, whose office was on Millbrook Street downtown, and asked her to review it. "It's aggressive," Patricia told me, sitting across her desk, reading the documents I'd managed to obtain. "And likely invalid, given that your grandmother retained legal capacity until her death. But it would take resources to fight." "Whose resources?" "Mine," I said. "You'd need documentation. Letters, financial records, evidence that the trust was being mismanaged." "I'm working on that," I said. I was. I'd hired a forensic accountant named David Park, who specialized in elder financial exploitation, out of an office on Glenwood Avenue. He'd been working through the trust documents for 3 weeks. The picture emerging from the numbers was worse than Eleanor had described. Over 6 years, $327,000 had left the trust in transfers labeled variously as family loan, investment, and, in the last 2 years, simply administrative fee. There was no corresponding documentation, no promissory notes, no investment returns, nothing. My parents had been invoicing a dead woman's savings account and keeping the money. Then, 8 weeks after Eleanor's funeral, the cardboard box arrived. It came on a Thursday afternoon via registered mail from the office of Arthur Kimball, attorney at law, located at 14 Prescott Lane in Lenox, Massachusetts. I recognized the name. Eleanor had mentioned an Arthur Kimball once, briefly, years ago, in a context I hadn't fully registered at the time. I recognized the handwriting on the enclosed envelope because Eleanor had addressed 30-something birthday cards to me in that same precise, slightly right-leaning script over 30 years. I said it in the hallway. I went back to my client files. I made soup. I let my phone ring at 9:47 p.m., and I answered it, and I stood in my home office while my mother delivered her demand, $40,000, wire transfer, Thursday morning, while Gabrielle sat in a Greek jail cell, having apparently violated some regulation involving a boat rental and a disputed security deposit that had escalated catastrophically, the details of which my parents declined to specify. "This is not a request. This is a family crisis. Your sister needs you." "I wasn't invited to the wedding," I said again. "We've been through this," my father said. "The venue had capacity limits." The venue was a private villa on Santorini that accommodates 200 people, and you flew Marcus's entire extended family from 3 different countries. Silence. "Renee," my mother said quietly now, the quiet that was more dangerous than the clipped tone. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing. I think I'm having a conversation. I think I'm asking why you need $40,000 from me specifically when you manage a family trust that 4 years ago had over $400,000 in it." Another silence, longer this time. "That trust is for the whole family," my mother said carefully. "Yes," I said, "it is. I know that. I've actually looked at the statements, Mom." The silence that followed this was a different kind entirely. It was the silence of a person realizing the ground has shifted beneath them and needing a moment to recalibrate. "I don't know what you think you've seen." I've seen the statements, I said. The ones from 2018 through last year. I've had a forensic accountant named David Park review them. I also received a package today from Arthur Kimball's office in Lenox. My father's voice, very quiet. What kind of package? The kind Grandma Eleanor prepared 18 months ago, I said, when she realized what was happening to her money and decided to do something about it before she couldn't. Nothing. Dead air on the line. Don't open that, my father said, and the flatness in his voice told me everything I hadn't been sure about until that exact moment. I sat down on the edge of my desk. I already did, I said. I hadn't. Not yet. But something in me needed to say it first, needed to hear how they responded to the idea of it, needed to know for certain. And the way my father breathed in, the sharp, involuntary intake, confirmed it. They knew what was in that box. Renee, listen to me. My father's voice shifted. New register. Controlled, reasonable, the voice of a man trying to manage a situation. Whatever your grandmother left, whatever she said, she wasn't well at the end. You know that. Her memory was fine, I said. I drove up every 6 weeks for 3 years. I sat with her at that kitchen table. She was fine. The mild dementia diagnosis she received affected short-term memory acquisition, not executive function or legal capacity. I've spoken with her neurologist. She retained full legal capacity until 10 days before her death. I paused. I've been doing my homework. My mother said very precisely. You are making a mistake. I've been making mistakes my whole life, according to you, I said. Everything is a mistake. Everything is harder than it needs to be. But here's the thing, Mom. I have a forensic accountant's report. I have 3 years of trust fund statements. I have a guardianship petition that my attorney says is legally invalid, and I have a sealed envelope from Eleanor's attorney that I will be opening in about 5 minutes. Renee, I'm not wiring $40,000 to Greece, I said. I am not paying for Gabrielle's legal situation. I was not invited to be part of this family when things were good. I am not available to be part of it now that things are difficult. You would abandon your sister. I'm hanging up now, I said. Don't you dare. I hung up. The phone buzzed immediately, then again, then a third time, now from a number I recognized as my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, conscripted into the relay. I turned the phone face down on the desk. Then I walked to the hallway, picked up the cardboard box, carried it to my home office, and sat down on the floor with my back against the desk, the way I had when I was small and needed to feel grounded, low to the earth, solid surface behind me. I opened the box. Inside was a sealed envelope, cream-colored, my name written on the front in Eleanor's handwriting. Beneath it, 2 manila folders, a thumb drive in a small plastic case, and a folded deed with a notary seal that I recognized. Blue ink. Official, the kind of document that announces itself. I opened the envelope last. Dear Renee, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and your parents are already doing what I knew they would do. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it while I was alive. I tried, in the ways available to me, but your father doesn't hear reason, and your mother has convinced herself that what they've taken was theirs to take. They only hear documents. So I've given you documents. Do you remember the summer you were 9, and we sat on the porch in the rain because you refused to come inside until you'd finished the math puzzle you were working on? I brought you a blanket and sat beside you. You solved it at 11:14 at night by flashlight. I told you then. You have a mind that doesn't stop, and the world is going to need that. I meant it. I still mean it. The original trust documents and amendment records are with my attorney, Arthur Kimball, at 14 Prescott Lane in Lenox. He has been holding them for 14 months. He will know what to do. Inside this envelope and the folders below, certified copies of the original trust instrument, naming you as remainder beneficiary, bank statements from 2017 to 2023 showing all unauthorized transfers, 3 written statements from witnesses, including my accountant of 20 years, attesting to the nature of those transfers. The deed to the Berkshire's house, which I transferred to a separate irrevocable trust in your name in March of last year, outside the reach of any guardianship petition. A letter to Arthur, authorizing him to file for full accounting of the trust assets on your behalf. Don't tell your parents until you're ready. Wait until Arthur advises you. He will know the right time. You are not the difficult one, Renee. You are the honest one. There is a difference, and it took me too long to say so out loud. All my love, always. Your Grandma P.S. The porch light is on a timer. You'll know how to find the key. Yeta! I read it twice, then a third time. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. I thought they would shake. Instead, everything felt very still and very clear, like the moment after a loud sound when the silence rushes back in to fill the space. $327,000. A house. An irrevocable trust with my name on it. Documents collected by an 84-year-old woman over 18 months, while her own children were draining her savings, who had sat across from me at a kitchen table with butter toast and a ledger and said, "Money is just information." Who had known that the right information, kept safe and delivered at the right time, was the only armor that actually worked. I opened the manila folders. The bank statements were there, 12 of them, spanning 6 years, annotated in Eleanor's handwriting in blue pen. She'd circled each unauthorized transfer, noted the dates, written the cumulative total in the margin. At the bottom of the last page, underlined twice, $327,400. No authorization, no promissory note, no return. The witness statements were signed and notarized. Her accountant of 20 years, a man named Gerald Fitch, whose letterhead listed an office in Stockbridge. 2 pages, dated 8 months before Eleanor's death, attesting in careful, professional language that he had raised concerns about the trust account activity with Eleanor's family in 2020 and had been removed from the account in 2021. Removed after raising concerns. I sat on that floor for 31 minutes. Then I called Arthur Kimball. Arthur Kimball was 71 years old, deliberate in his speech, and clearly fond of Eleanor in the way that suggested decades of professional relationship that had become something more like genuine regard. "She told me about you often," he said, when we met in his Lenox office the following week. "She said you were the one who got it, the ledger." He smiled. She was very proud of that ledger. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We file for a full accounting," he said. "We present the forensic analysis. We contest the guardianship petition, which, as I understand your own attorney has noted, is legally invalid, but should be formally dismissed." He paused. "And we register the irrevocable trust on the Berkshire's house." "The deed is already transferred?" "March 14th of last year," he said. "Notarized and recorded at the county clerk's office. Your parents don't know." He folded his hands. "Your grandmother was very clear about timing. She wanted the documentation complete and unassailable before anyone knew it existed." "She thought of everything," I said. "She thought of the things that mattered," he said quietly. "She thought of you." The conversation with my parents, the real one, not the phone call, happened not at a gala, not at a dinner table surrounded by relatives, not in the kind of dramatically staged confrontation that exists in movies. It happened in a conference room at Arthur Kimball's office in Lenox on a Friday afternoon in November, 3 weeks after the phone call, when my parents arrived for what they believed was a mediation meeting regarding Eleanor's estate. There were 11 people in that room: Arthur Kimball and his associate, my attorney Patricia Wolfe, David Park, the forensic accountant, my parents and their attorney, a man named Gregory Sult, who wore a blue tie and kept checking his phone, my Aunt Dora, Eleanor's surviving sister, who had driven up from Connecticut and whom my parents had not expected to see, and me. I had chosen to sit at the corner of the table, not at the head, not opposite my parents directly. The corner, near the window. There was weak November light coming through the glass, the hills outside gone brown and bare. And I thought about Eleanor working on a math puzzle in the rain. My parents arrived together, my father in a navy blazer, my mother in the gray wool coat she wore for important occasions. They looked at the room, at Patricia Wolfe, at David Park, at Aunt Dora. And something shifted behind my father's eyes, a recalibration. My mother's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We weren't told this would be a large meeting," my mother said. "It's an estate matter," Arthur said pleasantly. "These things involve parties." They sat down. Gregory Solt put his phone away. Arthur led the meeting through its initial procedural stages with the unruffled efficiency of a man who had been doing this for 40 years. He outlined the trust, its original terms, the amendment records. He noted the current balance. My parents' attorney began to speak. Arthur raised one hand gently and continued. He presented David Park's forensic analysis, 17 pages, tabbed and indexed, copies in front of each person at the table. I watched my father read the first page. His face didn't drain of color dramatically. It did something quieter, a settling, a compression, like a structure losing its internal support slowly rather than collapsing. "These figures," Gregory Solt started, "are documented," David Park said mildly. "Each transfer corresponds to a specific date and account. The supporting documentation, or the absence of it, is noted in the appendix." My mother looked up from the papers. She looked at me. I looked back. "Renee," she said. Her voice was measured, still controlled. "I don't know what you think you're doing." "I'm sitting in a meeting," I said. "This family, Mrs. Russell," Arthur said politely. "Perhaps we should let the documents speak first." My Aunt Dora, who had been silent in the corner, looked at my mother for a long moment, and then looked away. The look was not angry, it was something worse than angry. It was the look of a person recognizing something they had suspected for a long time but hoped wasn't true. $327,000, my father said finally. Not to anyone in particular, almost to himself, like a man checking a number he'd been trying not to look at. Plus the administrative fees from the last 2 years, which bring the total to approximately $341,000, David Park said. "We were managing the estate. There are no management agreements," Arthur said. "No fee schedule. No authorization for any of the transfers beyond the original power of attorney, which covered medical decisions, not financial ones." He paused. "The trust document itself, which your mother was explicit about, names Renee as remainder beneficiary with your names as co-trustees only in the event of Eleanor's incapacity. She was not incapacitated. She retained full legal capacity until 10 days before her death. The dementia, mild vascular dementia affecting short-term episodic memory," Arthur said. "Confirmed by her neurologist, Dr. Ewan, at Berkshire Medical. I have his statement in the packet before you." My mother opened her mouth, closed it. Gregory Solt was writing something in his notepad. I couldn't see what. "The guardianship petition," Arthur continued, "will be formally contested and dismissed. The grounds for filing were insufficient, and the filing itself was, in the opinion of both Ms. Wolfe and myself, made in bad faith." He removed a document from the folder before him and slid it across the table. "This is the deed to Eleanor's property in the Berkshires. It was transferred to an irrevocable trust in Renee's name on March 14th of last year. Notarized and county recorded. The transfer predates your guardianship petition by 4 months." My father looked at the deed. He looked at me. For the first time in my memory, Harold Russell had nothing to say. "The trust account," Patricia Wolfe said, stepping in with her own folder, "will be subject to a full legal accounting. We will be pursuing recovery of the unauthorized transfers through the appropriate channels. I've prepared the relevant filings." "You can't do this," my mother said, and her voice had lost its shape. The controlled register gone. Something underneath coming through that I hadn't heard before. Raw, frightened. "This is family money. This is a family matter. You are airing private—" "Mom," I said. She stopped. I spoke calmly. I had promised myself I would be calm, and I was, because Eleanor had taught me by example that calm is not weakness, it is the willingness to let the facts be louder than your feelings. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said. I want you to know that. I'm doing this because Eleanor spent 18 months making sure there would be documentation, making sure there would be a record, making sure I would have something solid to stand on when you came to me with your hand out. She knew this was coming. She knew you would come for the house after she was gone. She knew you would file the petition. She prepared for it. I looked at my father. She prepared because she loved me and she didn't trust you to. My mother's eyes were bright. She was not crying. My mother did not cry in front of audiences. You were always going to make everything harder, my father said. His voice was quiet, automatic, like a phrase that plays without conscious input. You always make everything harder than it needs to be. No, I said. I stood up. I made exactly one thing harder. I refused to disappear. I picked up my folder. I looked at Aunt Dora, who nodded once, just slightly, the smallest acknowledgement of something. I walked out. In the hallway, Patricia Wolfe caught up with me 30 seconds later. That went as well as possible, she said. Did it? Your father's attorney looked like he wanted to be somewhere else, she said. That's usually a good sign. I laughed, briefly. It surprised me, the laugh rising up without warning, not bitter and not triumphant, just the release of something that had been held a very long time. The legal process moved on its own track after that. Forensic accountants and attorneys don't need me in the room for most of it. That's what retainer fees are for. Patricia Wolfe filed for full trust accounting in December. The unauthorized transfer amounts were formally documented. My parents' attorney, Gregory Sult, withdrew from the case in January. I heard this from Arthur Kimball, who mentioned it with the measured neutrality of a man who had seen many things and chose to register only the most significant. In February, a settlement was reached. I won't detail the terms beyond saying that Eleanor's house in the Berkshires remained in the irrevocable trust, mine, legally, permanently, and that a recovery amount was agreed upon. My parents did not go to prison. I had not sought that. What I sought was documentation, clarity, and the house. My Aunt Dora called me in January. She said she'd known for years that something wasn't right. She said she hadn't known how to say it. She said she was sorry. You don't owe me an apology, I told her. I know, she said. I'm giving you one anyway. My cousin, who had been one of the relatives my parents mobilized to call me during the Santorini crisis, sent me a text that said simply, I'm sorry. I didn't have the full picture. I appreciated the honesty. I told her so. Gabrielle, I don't know all the details of what happened in Santorini. I know she eventually resolved her legal situation there through other means, that Marcus's family contributed, that my $40,000 was never part of it. I have not spoken to her. I don't know if that will change. On the first Saturday in March, I drove up to the Berkshires for the first time since Eleanor's death. The house was as she'd left it. White clapboard, green shutters, the porch wrapping around two sides. Inside, it smelled like old wood and cold air, and faintly, still, like something warm underneath that I recognized immediately and couldn't name. The kitchen was intact. My mother had reorganized it years ago, but Eleanor had put things back. The coffee canister with the cracked lid and the faded rooster from the 1974 New Hampshire trip was on the counter where it belonged. I sat down at the kitchen table, at the spot worn smooth on the right side, where Eleanor had sat every morning for 40 years. I put my hands on the wood. I sat there for a long time without saying anything to anyone. Through the window, bare March trees against a pale sky, the kind of light that is neither warm nor cold, just clear, just itself. Yet, 6 months later, the Berkshires house has become what Eleanor probably always intended for it to be, a place where I go when I need to remember who I am. I drive up every few weeks. I've repainted the porch. There's a small vegetable garden started on the south side of the yard. Nothing ambitious yet, just herbs and some early greens. A cat has appeared from somewhere in the surrounding woods. I've been leaving food out and she's started to stay. I've named her Star. My consulting firm signed its largest client to date in April, a regional manufacturing company that needed a full operational audit and restructuring plan. I hired a second associate. I moved into the commercial space on the east side of town that I'd been saving for. I kept the ledger, Eleanor's cloth-bound ledger from her kitchen table. It sits on the shelf in my home office now, beside my own financial records, which are meticulous and documented and kept somewhere no one else has access to. If you're watching this and you've spent years making yourself smaller to keep the peace in a family that kept taking up more space, I want to say this one thing. Silence is not peace. Silence is the rent you pay to live in someone else's version of reality. Eleanor didn't fight loudly. She didn't confront anyone. She didn't call family meetings or send letters or make scenes. She made documents, she made records. She made an irrevocable trust and filed it at the county clerk's office and told her attorney to wait for the right time. She understood that the loudest thing you can ever say to someone who has decided you don't matter is a piece of paper with a notary seal that proves, unambiguously, that you planned for this, that you were always thinking ahead, that you mattered enough to yourself to prepare. I am 35 years old. I have a consulting firm and a client roster and a commercial space with my name on the lease. I have a house in the Berkshires with a cat named Star and a cracked coffee canister on the kitchen counter and a garden that is just beginning. I have a ledger. I have documents. I have everything I need. If you've ever had someone take something from you and tell you it was for your own good, type "I know what was taken" in the comments. Or if you're still in the middle of it, still building, still figuring out your next move, type "I'm still building." Both are valid. Both take courage. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself out there.